Hello everyone, I'm back from another deck tech, and as you can tell by this pile of red cards, well, we obviously have another red deck. Oddly enough, my last deck tech that I did that was red was a Frontier deck, and although Frontier's kind of lost a lot of popularity, even though it hasn't really been around that long, I've actually still been playing Frontier a little bit, and this is the deck I've been playing most recently. This is Frontier Goblins, and it actually has a lot of very iconic Goblin cards from Magic's history. Surprising to say that since Frontier has not been around that long. Now, like I say, there are a lot of great Goblin cards, but we'll start with the low end of the curve and work our way up. Now, one thing this deck does remind me of, it does remind me a lot of the red aggressive decks that were very popular around the time of Theros, M15 standard, which had Return to Ravnica in it, but I think it was mostly Theros and M15 cards. And these were two of the biggest one-drops in those decks. We had Foundry Street Denizen and Frenzied Goblin. Foundry Street Denizen is a ridiculous creature, although it kind of looks underwhelming at first glance as just a 1/1 for 1. We get a lot of goblins into play at a time, so usually on average, Foundry Street Denizen is usually like a 2/1 or a 3/1. It's really ridiculous, and it will trade with a lot of creatures that you wouldn't expect it to trade with. It's really great. However, there are some scenarios where you don't want your creatures to trade. You want to keep your board presence, and that's why I have to run Frenzied Goblin. I know a lot of people would probably recommend me running a little fewer copies, but I like the 4 of just because it really does help you get your army in, and there are really often times where your opponent is just going to have one creature or like one creature that's really designed to be a blocker, and I feel like Frenzied Goblin just kind of eliminates that creature from the picture. You do want to kind of be careful. Your opponent, if your opponent does have more creatures, and you do make them one of them unable to block with the Frenzied Goblin, then the other ones can block the Frenzy Goblin, and then they'll just be blocking you all day, so you do have to kind of be careful with that sense. But these are really great one-drops for this deck. They're very flavorful, very effective, work with the other cards in the deck, and it's just fantastic. Another thing I love about Foundry Street Denizen is it's any red creature you want, so if you want to splice, or not splice, but put other red creatures that aren't goblins necessarily in this deck, be my guest. Now, if you really wanted to, you could run like a set of Goblin Glory Chasers. That's another okay card for this deck, but I really think that these two creatures serve the deck better, just because Foundry Street Denizen is a lot more powerful, and Frenzy Goblin just gets all your creatures through in most scenarios. Glory Chaser doesn't do that. It's kind of selfish. It just makes it so it's hard to block it and not your whole team. Next up, we have the cards that really push our board state advantage and really get us to the power level that we want in terms of getting to our, I guess you could say, our alpha strike, more or less. Starting with the 2 mana slot, we have the 4 copies of Dragon Fodder. It's actually not the only 2-drop we run. We run quite a few more 2-drops, but Dragon Fodder is fantastic just because we want to go long in this deck. We want to make sure that our opponent can't block all our creatures, and we want our creatures to do a pretty hefty amount of damage. This is also why we run a full set of Reckless Bushwhacker, which is a phenomenal card, a great card in Modern, as a matter of fact, part of the 8-whack deck, which I'll probably do a deck tech of soon. But Reckless Bushwhacker is just a bad mamma jamma. Get a Dragon Fodder out the same turn, then just play Reckless Bushwhacker. If you have a whole horde of goblins out already, you're gonna do tons of damage. You'll be doing alpha strikes from at least 10 to 12 damage if you have a good amount of goblins in play, that is. But just to add insult to injury, I'm currently running a full set of Hordling Outbursts. This could probably be something different, but I just like having it just because playing one of these with a Foundry Street Denizen makes it a 4/1, if not more, if you have more mana and you're able to do more things. But it's just wonderful. You want to go long with this deck. You want to be sure you can get all these little 1/1s in. And yeah, they are 1/1s, so there are lots of things that can kill like a horde of 1/1s. There's a few board wipes, but the way I see it is that most decks in this format don't really run too many board wipes, at least at the moment. just because they're not as great as other board wipes in other formats. Seriously though, board wipes are probably this deck's biggest weakness, and also probably a couple of spot removal spells, which I'll talk about later. But anyway, let's keep going. We're going to be talking about the powerhouses next. These 8 cards here, I guess you could say, are the most powerful cards in the deck. They definitely accumulate the most power of all the creatures I have. And they're just absolute face wreckers if you can get them rolling. Starting on the left, we have the classic Goblin Pile Driver, which was a staple in Legacy Goblins for at least a decade. It was just ridiculous. It's arguably, well, not as strong in this format because we don't have Aether Vials or... but honestly, I don't think we have to worry too much about counter spells, at least at the moment. But anyway, like I say, Goblin Pile Driver, in addition to having protection from blue, just gets absolutely huge. If you have Dragon Fodder or have casted Dragon Fodder later in the game or Hurling Outburst later in the game, this thing will just be so powerful, and it's just absolutely insulting if you have like a Frenzy Goblin or have another way to get rid of your opponent's creatures. It's just, actions in this deck speak a lot louder than words, and once you see your Goblin Pile Driver be like a 9/2 or not bigger, yeah, your opponent's just going to be kind of rolling over and dying. That's the simplest way to put it. Another card in the deck that will make your opponent likely do this, unless they have an answer to it, is Goblin Rabblemaster. Goblin Rabblemaster is a classic Goblin. Was a monster in Standard, is actually played in Modern and Legacy to this day, and it obviously has a home here in Frontier. Wonderful card, gives you a goblin each turn. The downside is all your other goblins have to attack, but when Rabblemaster attacks, it gets really flippin' huge. Often, probably not often as huge as Pile Driver, but it's still really huge, and if your opponent can't block it, it will end the game really quickly. The big issue I think I have with these creatures is your opponent will likely kill them. Things like Fatal Push do exist. And yeah, that's the big downside. Sadly, since we're just playing mono red, we don't have any way to get back our creatures. So you're going to have to hope that these guys get there, or you're going to have a way to, I guess you could say, a backup plan or a backup card to really push your board state through to do damage. Next up, we have our burn package, which is surprisingly small for a red deck, but it really is not bad because we want our creatures to be doing the work. We have so many goblins that'll keep on attacking and attacking until they get steamrolled. But our 2 burn spells of choice for this format are Lightning Strike, which is basically the format's Incinerate, and Stoke the Flames, which is a very nice spell. Gets rid of 4 toughness creatures, which historically have been very tough for red to deal with. I also could have run what's it called? Exquisite Firecraft instead of Stoke the Flames. It does cost 1 less, but I kind of like Stoke a little bit better for this deck. 1, because it's an instant, and 2, because you often will not cast it for 4 mana. You have a lot of goblins. You can tap your goblins to have it do some work by using Convoke. These are nice spells. You want to use them in pinches to get rid of your opponent's creatures so you can attack with your Horde of Goblins, because most often than not, your goblins are going to be doing a lot more damage than your burn spells. And also, you can just use it to finish off your opponent when you're in range, which is pretty nice. It's also important to note that I do run a copy of Goblin Dark Dwellers. This, I guess you could say, is the other big monster that I have if the game goes late. It will usually give me a Dragon Fodder or a Lightning Strike or Hurling Outburst. Sadly, I can't get Stoke, but it's fine. It'll give me a lot of goblins or an extra Lightning Strike, which is not too shabby, and also it's kind of tough to block. At the moment, I just run 23 mountains. This also works well if you are on a budget, if you don't want to invest in your fetch lands. Although I am running 23, you can probably get away with running maybe 21 or 22. In addition, you may want to put in an extra burn spell. Maybe that extra Exquisite Firecraft would be nice. If you want a little variety, then you could run Collective Defiance for a little bit of useful utility. You can do damage to creatures, players, and quite possibly recycle your hand if you're getting things that you don't need. My sideboard here is pretty straightforward. I have a lot of classic red cards. Starting at the top left corner and going clockwise, we have the classic Smash to Smithereens. Since this is not standard, Smuggler's Copter is still kind of a thing, so I want to be prepared for that. Next is Karyazev's Expertise, which replaced Act of Treason. Act of Treason is good, but Karyazev's Expertise is much better for this deck, and probably better for any deck that you intend to use Act of Treason in. The thing is, getting a opponent's creature for a turn and then being able to play something like Dragon Fodder, Lightning Strike, an additional creature, it's cool to have, and you will have to, the big downer, I think, of Karyazev's Expertise is you can't cast a Reckless Bushwhacker from its ability. You have to cast it for Surge, so you likely have to have 5 mana for that. You'll get another creature, then Surge in a Bushwhacker. It can be absolutely punishing. It's really, really good. Beneath that is our 3 copies of Roast, which is mainly for Siege Rhino in case we encounter them. I know you can use Karyazev's Expertise to steal that or anything else with 5 toughness. But sometimes we just want to get it off the table. Sometimes we just need a way to deal with big annoying creatures and not take them for a turn and then give them back, because we may not always win the game that way. But anyway, finally we have our full set of Arc Lightning. You could also, I guess, like I said earlier, if you know your opponent runs blue, you could run Exquisite Firecraft instead. I just like to have Arc Lightning to deal with things like Hangerback Walker or any other strategy that's similar to mine that goes wide, and just has all these little 1 toughness creatures, because you get to just distribute it among those creatures, destroy them hopefully, and it can be punishing in that regard, and occasionally it can do some damage to your opponent too, so that's really nice to have in a pinch. And that was Frontier Goblins. This is a fantastic deck if you love to attack with a lot of little creatures, or just love playing Goblin decks in general. Like I say, I think the deck's weakness is probably board wipes or any sort of spot removal. Fatal Push can really take out your biggest threats. But it's a fun deck, it's very effective, and there are lots of ways to deal with pretty much any creature-based threat in the format. I want to thank you all again for watching. If this is your first time checking out my channel, please like and subscribe, as it does help this video and all the other videos on my channel get out there to anyone who is interested in Magic the Gathering. Again, my name is Ryu Spectre. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I hope I will see you all next time.